Maybe you can help me with this. Julian Leaver's on the line with this. I need a title such as the Dapper Diplomat, but you already have that one. Can you suggest a good one for me?
I know we're going to have to brainstorm it out for you this morning.
I sure hope so, because that's a really cool title to have. Julian Leaver with us this morning. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, voted best personal injury law firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. He is the Dapper Diplomat, royal watcher, etiquette expert, and probably all caught up in this Prince Harry thing. The latest is that Harry says he and William actually got physical with each other, and William knocked him down, challenged him a little bit over the Meghan Markle thing. Wow. Julian, do you believe that?
You know, siblings fight. I think that's what we should all remember. Sometimes, things get a little crazy. And I think, we have seen a lot of articles that kind of talk about William's temper. He seems a little bit hot-headed, can go from 0 to 60 in just a few seconds. The same has kind of been said a little bit about King Charles, but to me, it seems really more like a sibling squabble, and it's being used to illustrate kind of and maybe infer on Harry's part some larger tension between the two of them. But I also think maybe Prince William is just really frustrated that Harry is really not kind of understanding his role and his place in the royal family at that time. And we have to remember, I think, also that we are only hearing one side of the story directly from a person involved, right? Mm-hmm. I will be interested to see if after this book comes out, if we see maybe Prince William or even King Charles sit down and give an interview about some other, or maybe under the guise of some other piece of information, and then address these allegations kind of head on. So it's going to be an interesting few days for sure.
Well, you talked about larger issues, and this certainly is, part of a larger issue, and that is the royal family and their problems that they're having, and it's odd, but I guess not all that unusual within the family dynamic that there is a rift, and Harry's book coming out is already causing all kinds of difficulties in terms of public relations, and it's just something that we expect that they'll be above that sort of thing. But they're people like everybody else, aren't they?
They are, and I think we have to remember that there's kind of two different parts of the royal family. There's the institutional part where the king is the monarch and that is the head of state of the country. And then there are the family dynamics, which I think just brew underneath the surface. And we're actually, for the first time in most of our lifetimes, getting to see that in a little bit more vivid way. I think, when the king's uncle, Edward VIII, abdicated, which then put her father in line for the throne and then ultimately her, we saw something very similar to this, where the king left and then he wrote a book and he gave interviews, and very, very, very similar to what Harry is doing right now. And so I think the most important thing really to remember is that this is something that is of the moment and that it will almost certainly blow over. I think Americans and members of the British public are interested in it right now in this moment, but 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line is a totally different kind of footnote to history as opposed to being breaking news.
And of course, back in the 1930s with the Wallace Simpson issue, there was actually a reported physical fight between two of the heirs apparent then, including the current king, where he got knocked down by his brother.
Yes, it's a very similar story that we're seeing kind of play out. And I think it's just emotions are high and tensions are high and families are difficult. We have to remember they're a family just like the rest of us.
Well, obviously, off with his head is not an option. Well, we hope it isn't an option right now. It used to be.
Not anymore. Not anymore, my friend. But it used to be a very convenient option for the royal family.
Yeah, it did. If Queen Elizabeth is still living, is all of this still an issue?
I think so. I think, honestly, Harry has a very clear idea of what he wants, and I think he set all of this in motion while she was still living. So we have to assume that he was under the assumption that she would still be living when this book came out. So I think he is really on his own track and really has an idea of how he wants to live his life, and that's just not within the confines of the royal family. So even though he had so much love and respect for his grandmother, I think his desire to speak out was really not going to be mitigated by her being alive or not, unfortunately.
And we know how strong Queen Elizabeth was in terms of family issues and come to the Queen type moments, and how she exerted her power and her influence over her entire family. Is King Charles, is he as strong? Is this his first chance to assert himself? And would he do so in the same way that she would?
I think he has, yes. I think we see in his withholding of the titles for Harry and Meghan's children as his kind of soft power exercise, very similar to what I believe the Queen would have done. She was really incredible at using kind of the mechanisms of the royal family and the institution to keep everybody in line and moving in the same direction. And I think we're seeing Charles do the same thing here. I also think it is interesting that we have heard from a lot of royal sources kind of close to the king that he has not cut off communication, that they are still invited to the coronation. They're keeping these lines of communication open. What I do wish that we could see, I really do wish that we could have a member of the royal family actually speak to us directly, because I think there are two sides to the story, and then there's the truth, right? We all know this. Yeah. And so if we could just be able to hear both sides of the story, then we could make a decision for ourselves. And so I think part of also coming from Harry's perspective is that he really doesn't want there to be kind of this shadow briefing situation going on where members of the royal family are briefing their own kind of courtiers and then they're briefing the press. I think if the family were to just directly head on confront these accusations, then we could all kind of see a clear picture and make some decisions.
Julian Leaver is with us this morning. Of course, the reactions to all of this are going to be different on this side of the Atlantic and on that side of the Atlantic. The people of Great Britain obviously are watching all of this as well. And whereas Americans might look at it and say it's a whole bunch of spoiled brats and who really cares, it means a great deal there. And it's interesting, and it's going to be really interesting, of course, once the book comes out, to see what the reaction is, because we've already got signs that they're splitting up into two sides, and Harry's not coming out very well. He's not looking very, very nice in the public image, is he?
He is not in the British public's eyes. This is just not something you do in Britain. I think we're very accustomed to this here in the United States. We're used to celebrities kind of airing their stuff or promoting even bad news to just be in the news, whereas the British are really keep your head down, do your job, do the work, get it done. And yes, there are some unpleasant situations that occur, but we're going to deal with those quietly and privately and within the family. And so I think the PR and the kind of American way of this being rolled out is very jarring for the British public, because this is really just not how things are done in Britain.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard for us here in the United States to understand.
Julian, do William and Harry, did they get this thing fixed up between the two of them?
I hope that they do. I really do hope that they do, because the piece of it here too is that William will ultimately be king. And so if they don't patch it up, then this is going to be a thorn in William's side throughout all of Charles's reign, and then also into his own. And so I think they do need to come to some kind of truth, at least, right? Maybe they're not going to come to the same exact understanding of what each believes, but they do need to come to some place where they stop throwing bombs at each other in the public sphere.
Well, they were best pals for so long, and of course, they were there for each other through the Princess Diana saga, and the whole world rallied around them. So you hate to see things like this in any family, but such a public family, obviously, it's better if they finally do patch things up and hope it's a strong patch.
Yeah, you really do. The other thing that I actually found was very interesting was that Harry, also in the book, they've said that when they had this fight, the first person that he called was his therapist, which I thought was very interesting. But what I also thought about that was very interesting was that there have also been all these accusations from Harry and Meghan's side that Meghan couldn't get any help and Meghan couldn't get da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But clearly there was a therapist involved. And so I think that opens up a whole nother can of worms about what's actually going on and what's actually being presented from Harry and Meghan's side versus the reality. So I think it actually opens a lot more questions that we haven't really gotten to yet, but we'll see more once the book comes out.
Absolutely. I bet you can't wait to read that thing.
Oh, we absolutely cannot.
It is
Only a few more days.
It's a royal can of worms, and the world is watching. Julian Leaver, thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Have a great day.
You too.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 11.6 FM and AM 11.6 FM.